We've got a great webinar for you today from Dianne Nichols, why phonological awareness is important, and she's going to talk to you about kind of why it's kind of a cornerstone skill for reading and learning language, and then give you some great instructional techniques to work with your students on developing their phonological awareness. Many of you I recognize, you're familiar with kind of how our webinars work, but those of you who are new, we're going to ask that you use the chat to introduce yourselves, to share links and resources with the group. We'll probably be posting some links there. We'll share that chat transcript with you after the webinar. You can use it to ask questions of the group. We are going to ask that if you have questions for Dianne, and she's going to have a couple of places where she pauses during the webinar for people to ask questions, as well as at the end. But we're going to ask that you use that Q&A button to enter those questions for Dianne there. That just helps us track those questions, make sure everybody's question gets answered, and Dianne has agreed to stay on as long as it takes to get everybody's question answered. We're scheduled to stop at the top of the hour, but we know sometimes we have more questions than time. So we usually cut off questions at the top of the hour, and then Dianne will stay on. We'll make sure everybody's question gets answered, and that's included on the recording. Which brings us to the next slide. We are recording. This is always a question that people have. And about a week, we're going to send out a follow-up email with links to the webinar recording. You'll also get the slideshow, the slides that Dianne's sharing. There'll be other resources as well. There's a webinar summary sheet that is a good resource for you to share with your colleagues. The chat transcript, the Q&A transcript, and those of you who are attending live will get a certificate as well. And again, that's going to be about a week. We try to get it out earlier, but you guys know how it is. We're all busy, and sometimes things come up. And now I'm going to turn things over to Dianne. She's a reading specialist, a tutor trainer for Literacy Delaware. And I'm going to let her introduce herself and go ahead and get started. So Dianne, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share yours.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Dianne Nichols. I'm a retired reading specialist and a volunteer for Literacy Delaware. Now, before we begin, I wanted to let you know that access to most of the information you'll see in my slides will be sent to you, as Todd mentioned, in the follow-up email. And I have scheduled a few stopping points, so if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A. Now, literacy is the ability to navigate the interaction between spoken and symbolic language. This is the focus of what we do with our learners through adult literacy. Now, many adult learners enrolled in programs are also learning English as a second language. And the task for these English language learners is doubly challenging to those who are native English speakers. Written language systems. Throughout the world, there are 5 different types of symbol systems that represent oral languages. Syllabary languages have symbol systems which represent whole syllables of the oral language. Cherokee and a few remote Japanese and Chinese dialects are examples of syllabary languages, and these languages are used by the smallest number of people. Abjad languages have symbols representing consonant sounds, and the reader infers vowels from the context. Hebrew is an example of an abjad language, and this type of system is also used by a relatively small population. Abugida languages, similar in construction to abjad languages, have symbols that represent vowel and consonant connections. Arabic and many African and Indian languages and dialects are examples of Abugida languages. Logographic languages have their symbols represent whole words or even phrases and are spoken by a somewhat larger population. Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and many other Far Eastern languages and dialects are logographic languages. The largest number of people in the world speak alphabetic languages, where the symbols represent discrete sounds. While there are well over 60 different linear alphabets, which are those made with lines on a surface, there are also many manual alphabets like sign language, Braille, or Morse code. The Latin alphabet is the one used to represent English, as well as many other Latin-derived languages. True literacy is the ability to accurately decode or read aloud, plus the ability to accurately encode or write using correct spelling, grammar, and conventions. Due to the reciprocal nature of these processes, instruction should always include both skills. Alphabetic reading terms. A phoneme is the smallest speech sound. A grapheme is a symbol representing a phoneme. And in English, this symbol can be 1, 2, 3, or even 4 letters. A syllable, in English, the smallest word part. In speaking, listening vocabulary, those are the words that someone can use to accurately express themselves verbally and also to understand the meaning of when it's spoken by others. Necessary decoding skills. There are 3 primary skills required for someone to be able to read efficiently. Phonological awareness is the ability to identify syllables within words, and more importantly, to be able to identify and sequence the individual sounds within syllables. Most students with a history of reading difficulties have a significant deficit in phonological awareness. English language learners also face challenges with phonological awareness, especially if their native language is not an alphabetic one. As this skill is the basic building block to learning to read, it's extremely important that we include explicit training in phonological awareness in our ongoing lessons. Letter sound connections. Many students, especially those who were not taught any phonics when they learned to read, have never learned letter sound connections beyond single letter vowels and consonants and maybe a few 2-letter consonant sounds. These students typically never go beyond 2nd or 3rd grade reading levels because they don't know all the vowel teams, the vowel R patterns, and multi-letter consonants. Knowledge of the 6 syllable types. These same students usually were only taught to read closed syllable or short vowel words and maybe some silent patterned words. Most never learned the other 4 syllable types and their associated vowel sounds. So when they reach grades 3 and 4, they have no clue how to approach the text with increasing multisyllable words. Knowing that every syllable has a vowel and how to divide unknown words into pronounceable syllables would allow these students to move beyond elementary reading skills. Phonological awareness. It is critical that beginning phonological awareness instruction be totally auditory with no letters or words. The instruction needs to be scaffolded, meaning that we start with the most global skill, which is identifying syllables, beginning with simple words and gradually moving on to more complex words. Syllable instruction can easily be included for a few minutes at the beginning of a lesson by asking your student to clap and identify the syllables in a list of 4 to 5 words you've prepared. You may need to model and clap with them until they begin to grasp the concept and to train their ear. Begin with 1, 2, and maybe a few 3-syllable words, and be sure they're successful before adding those with 4 or more syllables. Also begin with common words before adding more unfamiliar words. So here are some suggestions for examples of words that would be 1, 2, or 3 syllables and fairly common words, and then later on, more challenging words. Educational research indicates that the more senses that are engaged in the learning process, the better retention of new material. So thus many techniques that I'll discuss or demonstrate are multisensory. So when teaching syllables, you would use clapping, or maybe a hand under the chin, because every time you pronounce a syllable, your chin goes down. So I'm going to give you an example of some ways that I've taught students. So first of all, you would have the student listen. And I usually say, watch my mouth, so that they can get a feel for how my lips and my tongue and everything are moving. So the first word we're going to do today is today. Ready? You say it, today. All right? Let's clap it, today. Now let's count it, today. Oh, okay, that word has 2 syllables. Let's try another one. Ready? Listen carefully. Vacation. Now you say it. Vacation, you say it with them. Let's clap it. Ready? Vacation. Vacation. Yeah, that word has 3 syllables. Good. Here's your next word. Listen again. Mine. You say it. Mine. Let's clap it. Mine. Yep, 1 syllable. Good. Okay. So that's the technique that you would use, and you would go on many, many words. Usually I would start with, when I'm first starting with a student, I would use their name and my name. So my name is Dianne. They might have a 1-syllable name or 2 or 3, but having something that's very, very familiar is extremely important to get them engaged and get them really hearing and feeling. Once they've moved past that, then you certainly would want to include words like, let's do dictionary. You say it. Dictionary. Let's clap it. Dictionary. Dictionary. How about, this is a really hard one, so listen carefully. Electromagnetic. You say it. Electromagnetic. Ready? Let's clap it. Electromagnetic. Electromagnetic. Whoa, 6 syllables. And it's always very helpful to create your list of words well before your lesson, so you have that as part of your lesson plan. Now, most students with reading disabilities have great trouble discriminating and the separate sounds in blends, beginning blends and ending blends. But once they are able to hear that, you'll be amazed at how quickly and easily they're able to read blends. Now, identifying syllables in words, as I mentioned, is a global skill, while identifying the individual sounds within a syllable is a much more specific skill. We call this skill phoneme segmentation, and students may need lots of practice before they become proficient. It's important to begin with a 1-syllable consonant, vowel, consonant words, and then with success, add 2-letter initial blends, and then include final blends before moving to 3-letter blends, and then including some varied vowel sounds. Now, it's very helpful to initially have the student manipulate a set of objects, moving each object in sequence as they articulate the sound. And then later, when the student becomes more proficient, you can use the thumb and fingers. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration now too. And I've created some lists of words, a list of words that are just 3 sounds, and then some words with beginning blends, some words with ending blends, a 3-letter blend word, and then I've thrown in a different vowel sound. So what you would do is, again, say the word, have the student listen, bag. You say the word bag. Okay, let's stretch it out. Bag. What sound do you hear at the beginning of bag? Yeah, that's right. And I'm using the blue square for the consonant sound. Let's say the word again. Ba. Oh, there's the vowel sound. Ba. And I'm going to use a red square for the vowel sound. Ag. Ag. Bag. Great. Okay. The next word we're going to do is back. Listen again. Back. You say it. Back. Let's say, what's the first sound? Right, you're right. Say it again. Ba, back. There's the back. Now, what you may see a student do, particularly if they have some sight vocabulary, is build a second consonant sound at the end. And this is where you need to explain to the student, no, these squares represent just the sound. And you may know that the sound k at the end of back is spelled with 2 letters, but there are just 3 sounds in the word, back. All right, let's do another word. How about rest? Listen, rest. You say it, rest. What sound do you hear at the beginning? Good, you're right. Rest. What's the next sound you hear? Yeah, there's the vowel sound. Rest, rest. Oh, do you hear this? And rest. You may need to emphasize the sounds at the beginning to help your student, and then once they become more consistently accurate, then you can kind of pull back with that. But we always need to continue and do the tap and say. Rest, rest. So it's tap each sound, each phoneme, and then sweep. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a different word now. Let's try this word, bake. I'm going to bake a cake. What sound do you hear first? Boo, boo, boo. Bake. Oh, there's a different vowel sound, isn't it? Bake, ache, bake. Great. Now again, you may have a student that has some sight vocabulary, want to pull another red square down, and here's where you can explain. Well, you do know that this word ends in E, and that E is there to signal the first vowel, but that E is not making any sound. So we just have 3 sounds here, ache, bake. Now, Reading Assist is a Delaware nonprofit agency that trains and places volunteers into K-3 classrooms to help struggling readers. And Reading Assist has developed lots of really wonderful multisensory materials to support and encourage learning. And some of the things they've done are 2 games, which you will get in your email, Beginning Blend Bingo and Ending Blend Bingo. And they each will have an instruction page, kind of rules and how to play. And there are 3 game boards. And basically what I've done is printed the game boards out on cardstock and slipped them into a sheet protector, trimmed off the 3-ring thing. And then there comes with 2 pages of picture cards, and I cut those up, and we have all the little picture cards. Of course, this one is glue. So we would say, let's say the word glue. This is help students because blends are so difficult for so many of them. And okay, can you find the beginning blend for glue? And then of course, hopefully they do this. And we just use a dry erase marker to mark our board, and then can just wipe it off very easily and play again. When I play in Zoom lessons with my students, I have sent them a game packet, and I have one, and we take turns holding up the picture cards and saying the word and finding them. Now, these games are a motivating and fun way to keep a lesson productive and build on the phonological awareness skills that you've been teaching. Okay, here's a good place for questions.
All right, we have a couple of questions, I think some good ones, and I'll work on if I can get your image bigger for you during the presentation.
Great.
So the first one is from Marianne. She says, my student has difficulty remembering the names and sounds of many letters like M, N, U, H, and G. The reading specialist at my organization suggested focusing on 1 letter per class, so just working on A, then B, then C, etc. And doing that in order. Some are easy for him and some are hard. Her question is, can I work with him on some other skills at the same time? He's good with some sight words, and we've had success with flashcards. Can we do that during the ABC classes, or should I only focus on the alphabet for a while until he's more confident? And I think this is a good kind of, if I can generalize the question, is, do they have to have this phonological awareness before they move on to other skills, or can you kind of generally work on this phonological awareness skills in conjunction with developing other skills?
Absolutely, in conjunction. I mentioned that usually I would use maybe 5 minutes or a little longer to do phonological awareness at the beginning when I'm just starting to work with a student until they really get good with phonological awareness, and then gradually can decrease the amount of time there and work on things like letter sound connections or teaching the syllable types or other decoding skills, or like you said, some sight words, other skills.
Okay, and we have a question from Jean and a question from Suzanne. I think they're kind of along the same lines. So Jean asked, how do you explain the difference between a consonant and a vowel sound? And Suzanne asked, how do we explain what a vowel does and the importance of vowels? So you talked about in your demonstration, kind of getting the student to identify a consonant and vowel. How do you explain what those are?
Linguists have all kinds of fancy names for lots of things. And for people who are struggling to learn to read, or English language learners, when you throw all that on them, it's just going to be very difficult and too much. So I've just said, okay, these 5 letters are vowels all the time, and Y can be a vowel if it's not at the beginning of a word. And all the rest of the letters we call consonants, and that every syllable has to have a vowel.
Okay, perfect. And we've got a few more, but Dianne, I think let's go ahead and get back to the presentation, and we'll save the rest of these for the next break or for the end.
Sounds good. All right. So when modeling sounds for your students, be very careful not to produce a schwa after it. So I've heard teachers teach the sound for the letter B and say ba, and the letter T, ta. Well, it's going to be a very unusual person who's going to figure out how to say the word bat from baata. So that's why you really want to clip the sound as quickly as you can. Now, when you see letters enclosed by 2 backslashes, this is not the letter B. This is the sound B. Several consonants sounds in English include both a voiced and a non-voiced version in which the mouth positions are exactly the same. So see if you can watch my mouth while I pronounce these. B, b, b. So you can see that I'm pressing my lips together and kind of popping them apart. With students that have trouble articulating these sounds, particularly non-native English speakers, it's very helpful to use a little small hand mirror, and as you model for them, have them hold the mirror in front of their mouth and watch. And you can also kind of give them cues like, okay, to make this sound, I press my lips together tightly and pop them apart. Here we have d, t, g, k. This is an easy one to coach because you're going to take their top teeth and put them on the bottom lip. Here they're going to put their teeth together. English sounds also include j, where they press their tongue against the roof of the mouth. Pressing the lips together tightly. Some mnemonic devices that help people remember things, for instance, for the sound for R might be roaring lion, or the sound of the whistling wind. Here are some other consonant sounds, which is you can coach with a stick out your tongue sound, and also has a voiced and a non-voiced. Then we have sh, the be quiet sound, j, and the gong sound. Oh, I often teach this by showing a picture of a gong, or if anyone's anywhere near can remember when there used to be Roadrunner cartoons and the Roadrunner would hit the gong, there's a good example of that sound. Now, I do want to mention that IXL is a wonderfully scaffolded online learning program that covers pre-K through 12th grade skills. And if you happen to have access to IXL, your learners can practice hearing and identifying both consonant and vowel phonemes via pictures and very accurate audio. And Literacy Delaware was good enough to get a grant for us to make IXL access for our students. These are the vowel phonemes that occur in the English language, and many of them are represented by several different graphemes, which again can vary from 1 to 4 letters. The curvy and the straight lines indicate short or long vowel sounds. So the sounds represented here are a, a. Now, one thing you can teach your learners is that when the vowel says its name of the letter, that's the long vowel sound. So we have a, e, I, o, u, oi, aw, and ow. We also have English vowel R phonemes. These 3 sounds combine a slightly distorted vowel sound with a consonant R sound. And here's another time where you really want to bring out the mirrors and have your students model and watch how you make your mouth. So we're going to do the R sound. R. Notice how your mouth really opens very wide to make the sound R. And then for OR, your lips compress into a tiny O. OR. And then for your lips kind of pull apart at the outside edges of your lips. I'm going back to Reading Assist again. They have created this wonderful mnemonic device because so many learners, whether we're talking about beginning first graders or older students who struggle with reading, English language learners or adult basic English learners, many of them have difficulty learning to discriminate the sounds of the short A, short E, and short I. So this cue card is really helpful. I print it on cardstock and cut it into strips and give one to each of my students. So this is what it looks like, and I'm going to hold it above my head so I can point to it. So when you are teaching your student, you're saying, okay, this is the letter A, and the short A sound is for apple. Now pretend you're going to eat an apple. Hold the apple, get ready to take a bite. Go, apple, And the next picture shows the edge of a table, where you can't carry a table around, but I teach you can feel the edge of your hand, edge. And then we have itchy, and you have them scratch their nose, itchy, itch. And then for octopus, you see the octopus's tentacles, And then finally, up. Now you may want to, once you've introduced those, kind of have a list of words. Again, we're just doing this all auditorily at this point, so that you're going to say words for the student and have them try to identify the vowel sound that they hear and use the hand signals. It's fantastic that once you teach your student those and they remember them, as they're trying to figure out a word, I can see them doing this as they're trying to figure it out. So that really does work. And this is a great resource for creating lesson plans. It's the Reading Teacher's Book of Lists. Now, I think the most recent issue is the 6th edition, and it's about $35 on Amazon or $21 for a Kindle version. My copy is the 3rd edition, and you can still get a new one from Amazon for about $30 and a Kindle version for $18. But what's really cool is you can get a used version for somewhere between $4 and $7. And it is just a wealth of great ideas and things to use. So the table of contents for this book is actually 6 pages long, but the authors have included a 3-page user's guide, which is really great. I use this a lot, and you can see there's on the first page of the user's guide are lots of things you might use in teaching skills for kindergarten through 2nd grade reading level. For 3rd through 6th grade, there are a lot of other things, and then for junior high and high school. And the next page is really important for us. Here's a whole bunch of things for adult literacy and ESL, or English Second Language learners. And there are great things there. Then challenges for students is helpful. If you have an English language learner who happens to be very highly educated in their native language and they're thinking of going into careers in science or technology or something like that, there are some vocabularies and things that may be very helpful there for them. Now, I did tell you I would share some of the English sounds that are not used in other languages. Jacqueline Kress, in her book, The ESL Teacher's Book of Lists, has identified which English phonemes are not heard in 6 other languages. And her lists also appear in the Reading Teacher's Book of Lists, but you also will get these next 2 slides in your materials in your follow-up email. So in Spanish, they don't have the j sound or the sh sound or the stick out your tongue sound or the z sound. And look at the list of sounds that Chinese speakers do not have or are not familiar with. A few in French, Greek, Italian, and Japanese. Many of them are the same sounds, language to language. She's also prepared a list of English sounds that tend to be a particular problem for English language learners. So when you're working with not an English language learner, it's great to see if their language is here and really focus a great deal of your instruction in your phonological instruction on getting them to be able to hear and distinguish and produce those English sounds. Now, Jacqueline also really reinforces that it's so important to present all those sounds in the beginning of a word, the final part of the word, and the medial position. Here's our next question. Oh, I see we've got some more good questions.
We've got a lot of good questions. So before I get to those, I want to make sure the IXL that you mentioned, is that IXL, the 3letters.com?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. I thought it was. I'm going to post that in the chat. Somebody asked about that. Okay. So we had somebody ask, I work with older students who need these skills, older autistic students and English language learners. Any tips on how to modify your activities for them?
Well, specifically, those are the students that are going to need most those kind of hands-on, and you may have to help them with their fingers, or you may have to help them form, but definitely using the mirror and the more tactile things that you can do with them, the better. Okay.
And there was another question about the mirror, and this was from Allison, and she just posted a comment in the chat. So she said, my student is an English language learner, knows the letters and the sounds, but has trouble reproducing some of the letters because they don't exist in her native language. She says she meets on Zoom, so it can sometimes be difficult for the student to see how her mouth is moving. Any tips for folks that are trying to do this, not in person, but over Zoom?
Those are the learners, and I did work just on my own, not part of University of Delaware, but I did work with an English language learner. And one of the things I really encouraged her to do a lot, and I did set up an IXL account for her. I have several private clients that I have bought my own IXL account, and I added her to that. And that really was very, very helpful for her, because not only did it teach her vocabulary words, because it showed a very clear picture, and she could click the speaker button and hear the word pronounced over and over, and give many opportunities to discriminate short vowel sounds. And then once they got the short vowel sounds, then they could discriminate short versus long vowel sounds in words. And they're all beautifully illustrated with pictures and audio.
Okay, good. We had another question. What if your learner didn't get far in school in their native country? Any kind of additional difficulties with this, or any kind of different techniques that you would approach with learning kind of the phonological awareness?
No, I wouldn't say do anything much differently. It's just you're going to move more slowly. And I don't know whether they also have access to television or other things, where they can be looking and beginning to get some vocabulary, identify some vocabulary, so they can hear hear words. And then, you know, just use very beginning materials with them.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. I've got one more question, and then let's move on, and we'll save the rest of them to the end.
Okay.
This one is from Robert, who says, I have a student who has extremely short-term memory. So assuming like a kind of difficulty remembering things like from one day to the next. Would this phonological awareness tutoring work with him?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I did do as I introduced, and this is on the letter sound connection, so it's a different presentation, but I make up a little card for each student with the grapheme, and then on the back have some key words that I've taught them. And like this grapheme happens to represent 2 different sounds, and G is the most common, and the less frequent is J. So I teach them again with hand signals, G, J. And with students with short-term memory, I mean, I've worked with some of these, and it's just lots and lots of repetition over and over and over, and it does begin to come along a little bit. It's slow.
Yeah, I think, Diane, another thing that helps with that is like doing the same, working on the same skill, but with multiple activities, and certainly the multi-sensory approaches that you were talking about earlier also helps with that, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, let's save the rest for the end and get back into it if you want.
All right. Okay. So this is kind of a little bit of a review. Coaching phonemic awareness. First, model orally. Have the student repeat the word. Model using tokens. Have student imitate orally with tokens. Have them repeat the sequence orally, touching tokens with each sound, and then sweep across the word. That's what when I referred to tap and say. They tap each token and then swish. Okay, and then repeat until consistent success. So you don't want to go any further. And if you're not successful with your student with just consonant, vowel, consonant words, you don't want to go any further until they really are consistent. Then increase complexity gradually. Now, this technique that I'm talking about, this is kind of my variation on what's known as Elkonin boxes. And I'm going to stop here and do a little bit of a share. I use this little double-sided magnetic whiteboard, and these are available from Lakeshore Learning from somewhere between $5 to $10. And I've just cut 1-inch squares of craft foam and made them into magnets by cutting a little piece from a roll of adhesive magnetic tape, also from a craft store. And what Elkonin boxes look like, now this was from the Russian psychologist D.B. Elkonin, and in the 60s, in Russian, which is an alphabetic language, he used these boxes. This would be a word with a beginning or an ending blend because it would have 4 sounds. You'd erase one of these boxes if you were going to just do it with consonant, vowel, consonant words. But I find, and then they would have these boxes drawn on a piece of paper, and you could, using a desk, you would slide tokens. Obviously, if you're doing via Zoom, you're going to have to do something that you can hold up, which is why I'm using this. All right. So let's practice. All right. We're going to say the word. Listen, mop. You say it. Mop. See if we can stretch it out. Mop. What's the beginning sound you hear? Good. And that's a consonant sound, so we'll use the blue one. Ma. There's your vowel sound. Ma. Let's tap and say mop, mop. Great. Okay, here's your next word. Listen. Stop. Stop. You say it. Stop. What do you notice at the beginning of that word? Oh, yeah, we have a blend at the beginning of that word. Can you hear the first sound in the blend? Let's say it. St. Oh, good. All right. Say it again. St. St. Oh, your tongue is tapping your roof of your mouth. Yep. St. St. Ah. St. Up. Stop. Great. Okay, we're going to do a word now with an ending blend. Listen carefully. Wind. You say it. Wind. All right, what sound do you hear at the beginning? Good. Ooh, that's correct. Ooh. Let's say it again. Oh, there's the vowel sound. Wind. Wind. So we have wind. Wind. Now, this is also an opportunity that you might let your students know that this same group of sounds could change to a new word just by changing the vowel sound. So if we had a long I sound instead of a short I sound, this word would be wind, wind. Okay, adding symbols. Once your students are really, really very consistently doing the moving and the sounding well, then it's time to think about the next stage. Now, many students probably have some letter sound knowledge, and they may mention and connections of letters with sounds that they know, and certainly, oh yeah, that's great that you know that. Some you may have to teach them. All right, so this is another good time to add the next step. And I have them move the tokens either on a small whiteboard or piece of paper. When they correctly sequence, ask if they know how to spell the sounds, and as they indicate a correct spelling, then have them write the appropriate letter or letters below each of their tokens. Now again, repeat the process of touching each grapheme and sequence as they say the sound, and then sweep. So I'm going to again use my board. We're going to very quickly do mop, so I'm going to put it together. And then, okay, great. Do you know how to write this sound? Oh, yeah, I know how to write that sound. That's M. Ah. And he'll go, ah. And then again, you're going to do it with the grapheme this time. Ah, mop. Great. Okay, now we're going to do a word with a blend. Ready? Slip. And I'm going to say my student was really good. He put that together. Slip, slip, slip. Do you know how to write those sounds? Okay, yeah, I know how to write. What's the next sound? Sl, yeah. Sl, slip, slip. Now we're going to do another new word. This word is ship. And the student can go ship. Okay, now obviously you're not going to use this word unless you've already taught the student the sound sh and how to write it. So do you know how to write the sound sh? Oh yeah, I remember that one. And you have the student underline the two letters so that really that's another part of this multisensory connecting that those two letters represent one sound. So we've got sh, and it's really important to make sure that your students write the grapheme just underneath of its corresponding sound representation. And I'll show you why in just a moment. Okay, here's our word. This word today is 8. The number after 7 is 8. Now, again, you're not going to use this word with your student unless you've already taught them multiple spellings for the vowel team spellings for the sound long A. So we have, oh yeah, A, this word begins with a vowel, doesn't it? Vowel sound. Okay, so we have 8, 8. Now, how can we write A? And they might write this and say, well, that is one of the ways we spell the long A sound, but remember that one is A, never used at, maybe used at the end of a word. So this spelling comes at the end of a word, not at the beginning of a word. Can you think of one that comes at the beginning or could come at the beginning? And hopefully they try this one. If not, you can kind of help them. So A, the 4-letter A, is what comes at the beginning of the number 8. So again, you'd go 8, 8. Then your student might say, well, wait a minute, what about I ate dinner? Great. Now we're going to keep the same squares because the sounds are the same, 8. And how can we write that? 8. Now, does that say 8? No, that's a closed syllable. It's one vowel letter followed by a consonant. So the sound for this vowel is short. So it's at. How could we make it say 8? Oh, yes, it has that silent E to make or signal the A to say its name. But because the E doesn't have any sound, we don't have a square for that. So there are lots and lots of opportunities like this in a very physical way to demonstrate to the student how the language works in terms of the sounds and the graphemes. Principles of teaching phonics skills. Begin with auditory practice only. Incorporate multisensory techniques. When successful, then begin to connect sounds with letters or letter groups. Teach all possible sound grapheme positions, and ongoing assessment drives instruction. So here's some examples of teaching all possible positions. If you're teaching the short A sound, you might use words like at, am, an for initial, sat, map, tan for medial, ba, da, da, or the sound, fun, fish, after, off, if. Now, ongoing assessment can be as simple as, making some check marks, drawing lines through things on your lesson plan when you're working with a student, but I'm also going to share a quick 1-minute progress monitoring assessment that I use at the beginning of each lesson. Now, DIBELS, or Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, was developed to assess children in school, and the benchmarks were given at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year to identify which children really needed extra support. But DIBELS also developed a series of progress monitoring assessments that can be used every week or every other week. And so that's what this is a page from. I mentioned earlier, phoneme segmentation was what we were doing. And so this is phoneme segmentation fluency. This assessment is from the kindergarten level, but you can use it with any student. These materials are downloadable free from dibels.uoregon.edu. And this is on my summary page. Nonsense word fluency is another one. This is kind of the score recording, but it also has a graph. But this is the actual what you would do and say. So this sample page, your verbal instructions to the student would be, I am going to say a word. After I say it, you tell me all the sounds you hear. So if I say am, you would say and then the instructions also give some practice items and then scripted feedback. And then you'd get ready and start a timer. I use my smartphone for 1 minute and say, okay, here is your first word. You can see the first word is her, and hopefully the student will go, If the student just says her, they get no credit. If they go and maybe said ought, they would just get credit for the H. Now down here on line 3 is the word road. So you say road and the student says ode. Okay, they get credit for the and then just you draw a line under the OD and just one check that they just had one phoneme. In order to get all 3 phonemes, they go ode. Okay, this is the summary page that you will receive. Says begin with syllables, clapping, start with 1 to 3 syllable words, success gradually add difficulty, move to phonemes, tokens, or fingers, identify phonemes as a consonant sound or a vowel sound, color coding tokens helps, start with consonant vowel consonant words, then add beginning blends, final blends. When totally consistent with short vowel words, begin to add some long vowel sounds, teach phonemes in all possible positions, initial, medial, final. With English language learners, focus on the sounds not used in their native language. Use multisensory and mnemonic devices to support learning. An ongoing assessment is necessary to direct ongoing instruction. Increase complexity of tasks only after success is documented. And the bottom of the page is just a list of the materials and things that I have mentioned. So here we go, questions.
All right, perfect. We've got a lot of questions, and let me just remind people that we are about 5 minutes away from the top of the hour. I know that folks may have to go at the top of the hour, so let me encourage you, one, if you have questions for Dianne, go ahead and get those into the Q&A, because we will stop taking questions at the top of the hour. Dianne does have other things to do for the rest of the day, and we want to both appreciate and be respectful of her time. She has agreed to stick around and answer questions. We will continue to answer questions even after the top of the hour, and get those on the recording. So if you have to leave and you didn't get your question answered while you were here, the recording will go out and you'll hear it answered there. If you'd like to stick around and just listen to the remaining questions and hear Dianne's answers, you are welcome to do that. But like I said, we're going to stop questions at the top of the hour. So Dianne, we've got a bunch of them. First one is from Dawn. Do you have a system when you choose the words to practice syllables? So you've kind of shown us a lot of different lists of words that you use.
Here's a great place, but if I want a list of maybe to say 2-syllable words or 3-syllable words, I'll just type into the Google, list of 2-syllable words. I mean, sometimes I've done that. If I can't find what I want, I will particularly usually choose some of my words based on a phoneme that I'm working on too. And if I want to have a list that use that phoneme, then I might try that.
Okay, so kind of typing in, getting just a generic list of words, and then from that, focusing on the phoneme that you're working on. Do you try to use words that are part of the student's natural oral vocabulary?
If you can find words that are common words, and that's one thing I did emphasize, is you can just think of words in everyday language that are 1-syllable, 2-syllable, 3-syllable as you're beginning, and then start throwing in some more challenging words once they're successful.
Okay, good. We have a question from Donna. Do you ever count W as a vowel, as when it substitutes for U at the end of a word? Because we don't end English words in U, like in couch there's a U, but in cow is the example.
Here's the thing. W is never a vowel. However, W is part of a number of vowel teams like EW and OW and OW. The sounds for EW are U, U. Now, this is part of my presentation I have a similar presentation on letter sound connections, and that's where that would come in. For instance, OW has 2 sounds also, ow, O, ow being the most common, most frequent. So
W itself is never a vowel,
no,
but it is
part of a vowel team.
Perfect, yes. Perfect. We have a question here from Jenny, and I think this kind of goes back to some of the things that you said about the person who had short-term memory issues. Jenny asked, is this successful with students who have learning disabilities?
Absolutely. I mean, for the last 14 years of my teaching career, I worked with students who had learning disabilities, and all of this very explicit, much review, slow, but multisensory for sure. The more multisensory you can get them engaged with, the better.
Perfect. And then we have a question. You talked about not adding the schwa sound to the end. We had a question, just what is a schwa? Like, can you explain further what that sound is?
A schwa is an indistinct short vowel sound that often is at the ends of words. For instance, the name Elena. Okay, that last sound is it's kind of like it's actually the third sound for a but you don't really focus it. It's so subtle that you don't really hear it. And a lot of times when people who are not really aware of the explicitness of phonological awareness, they will teach consonant sounds by saying huh. b, n, g, as they're teaching children the sounds of the consonants. And so that distorts the consonants. So that's why I emphasize how important it is if we're going to teach the sound g, we just go g, and we just stop it right away. Don't let that sound.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. It's those hard consonants, I think, are the ones that are hardest to cut that schwa off. I know I heard a tip that has worked well for me, which is think of a word that has that consonant followed by a short I sound, because that short I sound seems to be easier to clip than other sounds. And you start to say that word and then clip it after the first letter. So if you were doing a B sound, you might think of the word bit and saying the word bit and then clip it after that B sound. But it is really hard to learn to isolate those hard consonants, especially.
Yep. I see Vicky's question, and yeah, Linda Moubel's great. Orton Gillingham, Spalding. I'm heavily trained in Spalding, so yeah, those are all wonderful programs, very explicit.
Yeah, and that's really the key, isn't it? Is that explicit instruction in the phonological awareness.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go down. I'm going to come back to Faye's question. I'm going to go down to Jean, who asks, how much do you discuss word meanings with learners at this early stage? So when do you kind of introduce the vocabulary definition aspect of it when you're also working on sounds, or?
Absolutely. For native English speakers, that's not usually so necessary. They've, I use common words, so they're used to hearing those words, but definitely for English language learners, yeah, you would want to try and use words that they've had some access to, or teach the vocabulary as you teach the skills.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go back to Faye, which is, I think, more of a comment. Faye says, so the phoneme awareness is critical in helping Spanish speakers learn or remember to include the final S.
I'm assuming she's talking about the final S in plural words. But yeah, phonological awareness is going to teach them to really hear the detail of all the sounds and words. So yeah. Beginning, middle, and ending. And that's something, you have to work on all those sounds.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a common issue with English language learners, that oftentimes they will leave off the endings of words. And so this is a good way to get them to focus on hearing that ending and then making sure they're including that with the word.
Right. And I mean, that's definitely for English language learners is part of, introducing the idea of letters that are added to the beginning of a word that change a little bit, or the prefixes and the letters added at the end, whether it's just S to make it a plural, or, ing or past tense ending, whatever at the end are the suffixes, and having them be aware of those. And maybe I do a lot of having students underline as they're starting to read, significant pieces, any multi-letter spelling, or like the ED as a past tense ending, is to emphasize their attention to that.
Okay. And then we have a couple of questions about, so people have really found your techniques very helpful. So we have a couple of questions about, do you have any videos that you've done that shows how to do this, or have you written books that they can kind of use to, as reference for how to teach these things?
Well, I do not have any videos, but I have 3 PowerPoint presentations that I've done, the phonological awareness one, and then I've done one on letter sound connections, and then I've done one on the 6 syllable types.
Okay.
I'm available to do those.
Okay, fantastic. So we can talk after this webinar about having you come back and doing some of those as well, because I think we see that there's a lot of interest and a lot of need for this work. Here's a question from Donna. How do you teach vowel sounds in unstressed syllables?
Okay, when we're talking about this phonological awareness at this level of students, we're not going to talk about stress. We're just going to get, here's the sounds, here's the sounds, here's the sounds. Only as the reader is beginning to get more sophisticated and start to decode some multisyllable words, are you then going to talk about the stress and how, and have them listen? You pronounce it. They might have been able to say the 2 or the 3 syllables, but it doesn't sound quite right. And that's when you introduce the accented syllables.
Okay. Okay. So you're kind of addressing that accent after they've gotten good at basic identifying the individual sounds. Perfect. Question from Donna: how do you interpret and use DIBELS scores for adults?
Okay. The phonological, the phoneme segmentation and the nonsense word fluency, I don't really use anything to interpret it. Basically, like at the very beginning, when we really haven't done anything, I'll say, okay, we've done this, and I see what their score is. And then hopefully, after several weeks, I start to see their score improve. And so that's a way that I can show them, as well as reassure myself that what we're doing is making a difference.
Okay. 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 So really using it to show progress.
Yes.
Okay. Here's a question. For an older student with basic 3rd grade skills, where would you start with phonetics or phonological awareness? Like,
okay, if they have 3rd grade skills, they probably have some letter sound connections and some phonological awareness, but they probably don't have the explicitness that we're looking for here. So I would basically go back and start with just the syllables. And then as if they've really got some things and they're moving along quickly, then you move them along and you go to the next stages.
okay. Okay. So kind of going back to that beginning place, would you just kind of start and go over all the sounds, or would you try to identify kind of the sound letter recognition that they already have and maybe focus on the gaps? Or
actually, I've developed a 3-part assessment that I use for students that I'm just starting to work with. And one is a phonological awareness assessment, where I'll just say a word and ask them to repeat or to rhyme, or, you know, eliminate a sound or add a sound. And very quickly, in a few minutes, I can get a phonological awareness assessment on them. And then I have a very quick letter sound connection assessment I do. And then I have a quick, do they know how the syllables work for the 6 syllable types? And I use nonsense words and, you know, can you read these words? And if they can read them, then oh, you know how to read that kind of a syllable. But usually there are several syllable types that they can't figure out. So that's how I know we need to work on those.
okay. Okay. Fantastic. And then our last question, and this is again kind of a great question from Jean. What type of homework is useful for very beginning reading students? So when you're trying to develop these skills, because they seem dependent upon having, because they're explicit instruction, they seem dependent upon having a teacher there to help them. So are there homework?
Well,
yeah, are there ways to assign homework where students can practice this outside of the classroom?
okay, one thing I mentioned is that IXL, and if you have an account with them that you are the teacher or the parent, you can go in and assign them certain skills. And so when they log in, there's a little oval with a star, and they click on that oval and star, and it takes them right to the skills that you want them to work on. That's one thing. But from having been an elementary teacher, some of the old reading series had these black line master little mini books, 1-page book that you could fold in half and had beginning things in it. And I've used those, and I just make photocopies of them. And if I've taught a certain letter sound connection, and then they will have to underline, you know, to show that they remind it, and that gives them practice in reading and decoding, and as well as a couple of sight words.
Okay. Okay, great. And I think that wraps up all of our questions. Dianne, I think this has been really, really helpful for folks, and very good comments, high praise in the chat. I think people found your techniques very helpful. This is clearly something that a lot of our tutors and teachers have struggled with, been looking for guidance, and I think they've got a lot of good techniques out of this. So thank you very much for sharing with us. Everybody that has attended, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for sticking around. As I said earlier, we will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording and Dianne's resources that she has mentioned here and will include in the follow-up. So everybody have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.